Usually, like when we talk about learning a new skill, we tend to treat it almost like downloading a file into our brains.
Hmm.
You read the manual, you memorize the vocabulary, you understand the grammar rules, and boom, the software is installed. Just ready to go.
Right, yeah. It's this purely intellectual approach. I mean, we operate under this really persistent assumption that if the data is successfully stored in the brain, well, the physical performance of that data will just automatically follow.
Exactly. But then you step into the real world. You try to speak a new language, like French, for the first time with an actual native speaker.
Mm.
Or maybe you step up to a podium to pitch a project to a room full of stakeholders, and suddenly that highly trained intellectual hard drive completely crashes.
Oh, totally. It is a complete systemic override.
Yeah, your palms are sweating, your voice is shaky, and you can, like, barely remember your own name, let alone conjugate some complex verb correctly in real time.
And it is incredibly frustrating for anyone who has put in, hours or weeks or even years of study, only to find themselves completely paralyzed in the actual moment of execution. The knowledge is in there, but the bridge to deliver it has just completely collapsed.
Which is wild. So what if I told you that confidence isn't a personality trait you're just born with, but a mechanical skill you can actually learn?
I love that framing.
Yeah, because today, for this deep dive, we are tearing down the biology of fear and completely rewiring how you communicate. We've compiled a masterclass for you today, pulling from a really diverse stack of sources. We've got AI communication research, insights from professional vocal coaches, language teachers, and peer-reviewed psychological studies.
And I think the overarching theme across all of this research requires a pretty massive paradigm shift for most of us. We really have to stop viewing nervous speaking as a character flaw and start viewing it as a mechanical failure.
A mechanical failure. That reminds me of learning to drive a manual car. Like, think back to the very first time you sat in the driver's seat of a stick shift.
Oh man, it's terrifying.
Right. You are hyper-analyzing every single micro movement. Your left foot has to, like, slowly release the clutch. Your right foot has to gently press the gas. Your right hand is simultaneously trying to find second gear. And, oh, wait, your eyes are actually supposed to be on the road.
Yeah, it feels completely impossible. Your brain is just overloaded.
Exactly. The engine stalls. You panic. You feel like an idiot.
But if you keep executing those micro movements over and over, eventually neuroplasticity does its job, right? Muscle memory just takes over.
Yeah, you don't even think about the pedals anymore. You just drive, adjust the radio, and enjoy the scenery. And that's what we want for you. We're going to move you from that clunky stalling phase to smooth, automatic confidence.
But to do that, we have to look under the hood. We need to figure out why the engine is stalling in the first place. Because the difficulty you experience when trying to speak confidently, it's actually deeply biological.
Okay, so let's get into the biology then. What is actually happening in my body when I freeze up trying to order a coffee in French?
Well, when you feel scrutinized, whether that's standing on a stage in front of hundreds of people or just sitting across a cafe table from a native speaker who is, waiting for you to finish your sentence, your brain perceives a literal threat.
Like a physical threat.
Exactly. The amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, it activates a severe stress response. It doesn't know the difference between a social threat and a physical one.
That is so crazy to me. We hear about the fight or flight mechanism all the time, but we rarely apply it to something as mundane as a conversation.
Right, but from an evolutionary standpoint, this mechanism is a masterpiece. Like if our early ancestors were walking through the brush and suddenly faced a predator, this amygdala hijack would instantly flood their bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol.
Just pumping the system full of stress hormones.
Yep. And it shuts down non-essential functions like complex rational thought or digestion, and it reroutes all that energy to the muscles so they could sprint for their lives or, fight to the death.
The problem is that punching your board of directors is generally frowned upon, and sprinting away from a French language exchange partner mid-sentence is a terrible strategy.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
So the saber-toothed tiger is gone, but the biological alarm bells are still ringing at full volume just because someone is looking at us. Isn't this just outdated brain software?
It absolutely is outdated software. It's a biological misfire. And the symptoms of this evolutionary mismatch are actually measurable. Like when that stress response hits, your entire physical communication system gets derailed.
Okay, derailed how? What does the data say?
Well, there's a fascinating 2020 study published in PLOS One that looked at what happens to the human voice under social threat.
Hmm.
And they found that this stress causes an average increase in speaking speed of 18 to 22%.
Wait, up to 22% faster?
Yeah, 22%. It's a massive shift.
That is staggering. So your brain is literally trying to rush the words out of your mouth so you can escape the threatening situation as quickly as possible?
Exactly. It's saying, get this over with so we can run away. And the physiological cascade doesn't stop at speed. Your vocal cords actually tighten and constrict under the influence of that cortisol, which pushes your vocal pitch significantly higher.
Oh, that makes sense. That's why people get that kind of squeaky thin voice when they're nervous.
Right. And you subconsciously abandon deep, stabilizing, diaphragmatic breathing, and you just revert to taking these shallow, rapid breaths right from the top of your chest. Plus, your eyes start darting around the room looking for an exit.
Just scanning for the nearest door.
Yes. And meanwhile, your brain starts aggressively injecting filler words into your sentences to just buy processing time while it panics.
Like, you know.
Exactly. We treat these filler words like bad habits we just need to break, but they are actually the verbal fingerprints of a brain in survival mode.
Wow, that really reframes the whole experience. We beat ourselves up for being nervous, telling ourselves we're weak or unprepared or just bad at this. But in reality, this is just your system trying to protect you, but actively undermining your delivery in the process.
It is. But the encouraging part of the modern communication research is that the brain responds to deliberate practice. Like, the stress reaction might never vanish entirely. I mean, even seasoned performers feel the adrenaline spike, but your mechanical skills can become robust enough to completely override the panic.
The biology is only half the battle, though, right?
Yeah.
Because there is a really heavy psychological layer compounding this fear, especially when we are stepping into the vulnerable territory of learning a new language.
Oh, absolutely. The mental game is huge.
And one of our sources, an expert language teacher named Tafani, breaks this down into 6 specific psychological traps. I want to dig into the why behind these traps because I guarantee you everyone listening right now is currently stuck in at least one of them.
Yeah, her breakdown is spot on. The first trap she identifies is caring too much about others' opinions, which triggers this assumption that everyone is harshly judging our skills.
The classic spotlight effect.
Exactly. You walk into a room or you open your mouth to speak a foreign language, and you feel like there's this massive, blinding, theatrical spotlight on every single syllable you mispronounce.
It's so true. I mean, the root cause of this trap is often rooted in social comparison, but it's a completely distorted comparison.
How so?
Well, we take our own messy, uncertain learning process, right?
Oh.
And we compare it to the polished highlight reel of a native speaker or some seasoned executive. We totally forget that the person listening to us is largely focused on their own internal narrative. They aren't maliciously cataloging our grammatical errors.
That is such a good point. People just aren't paying that much attention to your mistakes, which leads to the second trap, the dopamine crash of setting unachievable goals.
Oh, this one is brutal. A learner will get super highly motivated on a Sunday night and declare, I'm going to memorize 1,000 new vocabulary words in the next 2 weeks. Or I'm going to deliver this 40-minute presentation perfectly from memory.
And when you inevitably fail to reach that biologically impossible standard, your confidence doesn't just dip, it plummets.
Right. You step up to the podium or you sit down for your language practice, and your working memory is entirely consumed by the fact that you failed to meet your own standard. You're carrying the weight of perceived failure before you even utter a single word.
Which feeds right into the third trap, feeling unprepared, which leads directly to your mind going totally blank.
We have all been there. Someone asks you a question, and the hard drive is suddenly just wiped clean. Nothing there.
It's terrifying, but that blank mind is actually a direct result of the amygdala hijack we discussed earlier. When the stress response spikes, the brain deprioritizes the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for complex thought and memory retrieval.
So it's not that you didn't study, it's that the fear literally locks the door to the information.
Precisely. If you haven't prepared in a way that creates really deep, resilient neural pathways, the sudden spike in cortisol physically blocks your access to the vocabulary or the data you need.
Okay, so trap number 4 is a phenomenon we deal with in almost every facet of life, focusing obsessively on past mistakes.
Oh, the replay loop.
Yes. You could have a brilliant 5-minute conversation in French, but if you severely mispronounce one word at the very end, you will obsess over that single error while you try to fall asleep that night.
And this is totally driven by the brain's negativity bias. Because evolutionarily, remembering the poisonous berry that made you sick was far more important for your survival than remembering the beautiful sunset you saw.
So our brains are like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones.
That's a great way to put it. So every time you hyperfixate on a public speaking stumble or a language error, you are actively reinforcing a neural pathway of fear for the next time you speak.
That is so counterproductive. All right, trap number 5 is that slow burn confidence killer, feeling like you aren't progressing fast enough.
Yeah, we are so conditioned by instant gratification these days. If we don't see massive leaps in our ability week over week, we feel stagnant.
We totally ignore the plateau effect, which is a natural part of any complex learning curve where your brain is consolidating information behind the scenes. You are learning, it just doesn't feel like it.
And the final trap Tafani outlines is perhaps the most destructive of all, not enjoying the learning process.
Yeah, if the act of preparing for a speech or studying a language is associated purely with stress, anxiety, and dread, your brain is going to subconsciously resist the encoding process.
Because high cortisol environments severely impair memory formation. When it is time to speak, you associate the entire act with pain rather than connection or pleasure.
So if we look at the big picture, we have a prehistoric brain making our vocal cords tight and pushing us to speak 22% too fast, combined with a negativity bias and unachievable goals telling us we are inadequate. No wonder speaking up feels like climbing a mountain in a weighted vest.
The deck is biologically and psychologically stacked against us. There's no doubt about it. But recognizing these invisible forces, that's the vital first step. Once we demystify the fear and realize it isn't some deep personal failing, we can start constructing genuine assurance.
Okay, so let's talk about what that genuine assurance actually looks like, because I think our culture wildly misinterprets confidence.
Oh, completely.
We tend to conflate confidence with being the loudest person in the room. You know, the person who never backs down, dominates every meeting, and just refuses to ever be wrong.
And the sources offer a really profound corrective to that stereotype. We have insights from an executive coach, Natalie Lordell, who draws a sharp, necessary line between arrogance and true assurance.
Arrogance versus assurance. Tell me about that.
Well, arrogance, she notes, makes noise. Arrogance is actually a defense mechanism. It's this thick suit of armor covering a deep, unexamined fragility.
So the arrogant speaker overcompensates because they have this terrifying internal need to elevate themselves above the audience just to mask their own hidden doubts.
Exactly. But true assurance is remarkably quiet. It has absolutely nothing to defend.
Wow. Think about the freedom in that statement alone. True confidence allows you to look a stakeholder in the eye and say, that is a great question, and I don't know the answer yet.
Or it allows you to make a grammatical mistake in a foreign language and just laugh it off without your entire ego crumbling to dust. It doesn't need to dominate the airspace just to prove it has a right to exist.
That's a huge relief. So how do we measure this kind of quiet assurance? Say now AI, which is a research source focused on communication metrics, defines confident speaking not as the absence of fear, but as the presence of 3 measurable qualities.
Right. Self-control, clarity, and presence.
Let's unpack those for the listener. Starting with self-control. This doesn't mean you don't feel the adrenaline, right?
Not at all. It just means your pace remains stable under pressure. Like, if a client interrupts you, your voice doesn't suddenly trail off into a whisper, and your speaking rhythm doesn't triple in speed as you try to just rush through the rest of the slide.
You maintain the wheel, even if the car is shaking a bit. What about the second trait, clarity?
Clarity means the audience receives your intended message without unnecessary friction. So you aren't burying your main point in academic jargon, and you aren't mumbling your words to the point where the listener has to actively strain to interpret what you mean.
And the third quality, presence, is about engagement. You are actively locked in with the room or the person sitting right across from you.
You're not trapped inside your own head, frantically trying to manage your heart rate or mentally kicking yourself for a mistake you made 2 minutes ago.
Right, you're actually there in the room with them. Self-control, clarity, presence. To understand how an audience actually perceives these traits, we have to look at Professor Albert Mehrabian's famous 3V rule from his studies at UCLA in the late 1960s.
Oh, yes. This is one of the most cited and unfortunately most wildly misinterpreted studies in all of communication training.
You see this pie chart in almost every corporate seminar.
Every single one.
7% of communication is verbal, meaning the actual words you say. 38% is vocal, meaning your tone, pitch, and pacing, and 55% is visual, meaning your body language and facial expressions.
And people look at that and conclude, well, the words I say barely matter at all. I can just spout nonsense as long as I look confident doing it.
Which is a complete distortion of the science.
A total distortion. If you are conveying highly technical information or giving someone directions to the hospital, the verbal channel of the words matters entirely.
So where does the 738-55 rule actually apply?
Morabian spent years trying to clarify that this rule only applies when a speaker is communicating feelings or attitudes, and specifically when there is an incongruence between the channels.
Okay, let's translate that for the listener. What does incongruence look like in practice?
Well, imagine someone walks up to a podium, crosses their arms tightly across their chest, avoids eye contact with the room, and says in a shaky, high-pitched voice, "I am so thrilled and confident to be presenting this data to you today."
Oh, I'm cringing just picturing that.
Right. The words, the 7%, are communicating confidence. But the voice and the body, the 93%, are broadcasting absolute terror.
And the human brain, which is tuned for survival and threat detection, is always going to believe the 93% nonverbal signal.
Always. We are hardwired to detect deception or danger through body language and tone long before we process the syntax of a sentence.
So the implication here for anyone trying to improve their speaking is profound. You can have the most perfectly written, eloquent speech on paper. You can have thousands of French vocabulary words perfectly memorized. But if your physical body and your vocal tone are transmitting panic, the audience will only receive panic.
The words alone cannot save you.
Okay, so if our bodies are physically betraying us with shallow breaths, darting eyes, and tight vocal cords, how do we rebuild the system? Because the sources suggest it actually starts before we even open our mouths.
It does. Which brings us to the first phase of our step-by-step mechanical guide, building the mental and physical foundation. Confidence is not something you just summon out of thin air the second you start speaking.
Right, it's cultivated in the weeks and hours beforehand. Let's look at the cognitive framing first. Coach Elena Hurstel recommends a foundational practice she calls the success role.
I love this concept because it directly attacks that negativity bias we talked about earlier.
Since our brains naturally fixate on our failures and our stumbles, we have to intentionally force the brain to recognize our competence.
Exactly. So the success role involves physically writing down your daily successes, no matter how microscopic they might seem.
Like what? What counts as a success?
Well, maybe you successfully conjugated 5 difficult verbs today. Maybe you spoke up for 20 seconds in a meeting just to clarify a point. Or maybe you simply maintained eye contact during a difficult conversation.
So it feels a little silly at first, right? Writing down, I look someone in the eye. But by documenting these micro victories, you are actively participating in neuroplasticity.
Yes, you are building a catalog of evidence that proves your competence. And when you are sitting in the hallway waiting to give your presentation or walking into your language exam, you physically review this list.
And it yanks your brain out of the catastrophic what-if scenarios and grounds you in documented reality.
Exactly. It's data. Alongside that cognitive framing, the research heavily emphasizes the physical training of the mind through meditation.
Oh, meditation. Some people roll their eyes at that.
I know, but the app Pas de Panique, which translates to "don't panic," frames meditation in a way that just strips away all the mystical baggage. They describe it simply as muscle training for concentration.
I really love that definition. It's the gym for your attention span.
That's perfectly said, because when you are speaking, your amygdala will try to force your attention toward your fears. It will want you to fixate on the one person in the third row who is frowning.
And meditation trains your brain to notice when your attention has been hijacked and gives you the mechanical ability to gently pull that focus back to the present moment and the message you are delivering.
Think about it. If you can't focus on your own breath in a quiet, empty room for 5 minutes, how can you expect to maintain focus in front of an intimidating audience?
You can't. You are building the capacity to observe your own thoughts without being swept away by them. Now let's bridge that mental prep into the physical body. We discussed how the brain's stress response alters the body, but the feedback loop goes both ways, doesn't it?
It does. The way you position your physical container radically alters the chemical state of your brain.
Research from UC Berkeley, published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, demonstrated this incredibly clearly. They found that taking an expansive, open, and upright posture before a speaking task measurably increases the speaker's psychological feelings of power and drastically lowers their self-reported anxiety.
By taking up more physical space, like pulling your shoulders back, lifting your chin, opening your chest, you are essentially sending a mechanical signal back up the vagus nerve to the brain saying, I am not under threat. I am secure enough to expose my vital organs. There is no predator here.
That's a biological hack. And Say Now AI provides a very specific physical grounding checklist for the moment you actually step into the spotlight.
Right. Whether you are standing at a podium or sitting at a conference table, you must keep both feet completely flat on the floor.
And if you are sitting, do not cross your legs.
Never cross your legs. It throws off your center of gravity and subtly signals a defensive posture.
And what about our hands? I feel like I never know what to do with my hands.
The hands are where most nervous energy leaks out. The rule is to keep your hands visible and relatively still.
Because all those nervous micro movements, shifting your weight from foot to foot, touching your neck, playing with a pen, wringing your fingers, these are all kinetic signals of anxiety.
Grounding your feet and stilling your hands physically halts the anxiety loop from escalating in your nervous system.
To prove just how powerfully posture dictates our internal state, we have a fascinating exercise from the Clemma Educational Resources. They call it the haughty versus boorish exercise, and I highly recommend everyone listening try this in your living room later.
It is a brilliant demonstration of embodied cognition.
Okay, walk us through it. What do we do?
First, you walk around the room acting haughty, meaning arrogant or disdainfully proud. You puff your chest out to the extreme, you tilt your chin up so you are looking down your nose, keep your arms rigid, and walk with a slow, heavy, deliberate rhythm.
Okay, so if I do this, just sitting here puffing my chest out, you instantly feel a bizarre surge of untouchable energy. You feel larger than life.
You do. But then you immediately switch. You spend the next minute walking around acting boorish, rough, unrefined, and defeated.
So I drop my shoulders completely, let my pelvis slouch forward, drag my feet on the ground, cast my eyes downward.
And notice how the shift is immediate and profound. The slouching, dragging posture physically drains your cognitive energy. It makes you feel instantly defensive, smaller, and vastly less articulate.
Wow, yeah. Your brain receives the physical shape of defeat and just adjusts your mood to match.
Exactly. So if you walk into a boardroom or a language class with your shoulders slumped and your eyes glued to your shoes, you have already lost half the battle before a single word has been spoken.
You must build the physical container of confidence first, because the mind will follow the body.
And once the physical container is set, we move to the next crucial phase of our guide, mastering the instrument.
And the instrument, of course, is your voice.
Alina Hurstel uses a perfect analogy here. Imagine someone buying all the best gear, standing at the top of a mountain, and confidently declaring, I am going to ski down this black diamond run with absolute confidence.
But they have never actually learned how to turn, carve, or stop.
Right. The confidence is completely delusional. If you do not know the mechanics of skiing, your supposed confidence will just result in you crashing into a tree at high speed.
Ouch. But the same applies to communication. You cannot speak with enduring confidence if you haven't mastered the literal physical mechanics of your vocal instrument.
And the absolute foundation of that instrument is the breath.
We all think we know how to breathe, right? We've been doing it since birth. But stress completely annihilates our natural mechanics.
It really does. There is an exercise outlined in the sources called the piece of paper test that exposes this perfectly. It's quite revealing.
How's it work?
You place a tiny piece of paper on the floor, you ask someone to kneel down, reach their fingers as close to the paper as possible without touching it, and wait for your command to grab it as fast as they can.
Okay, so they're totally zeroed in on this piece of paper.
Yes. And if you watch closely as they focus intensely on the imminent, high-stakes action, they will almost always subconsciously hold their breath.
We do this all day long without realizing it. Like, we hold our breath when we are reading a tense email, when we are waiting for a Zoom meeting to connect, or right before we are called on to speak. It's a primal bracing mechanism.
But holding your breath is disastrous for speaking. It restricts blood flow, creates intense muscular tension in the neck and shoulders, and literally starves your brain of oxygen.
Which is exactly why people suddenly lose their train of thought mid-sentence.
Precisely. To combat this, we have to intentionally train diaphragmatic breathing.
This means abandoning that shallow chest breathing and pulling the air deep down into the belly. So if you put one hand on your upper chest and one on your stomach, only the hand on your stomach should move when you inhale.
Right, you are expanding your belly like a balloon. Shallow chest breathing gives you that tight, squeaky, thin voice of anxiety because it forces the vocal cords to do all the work with very little air support.
while breathing from the diaphragm provides a deep reservoir of air that gives your voice resonance, depth, and unwavering stability.
But how do we practice controlling that massive amount of air while actually speaking? The sources provide a phenomenal visualization technique called the spool of thread exercise.
Okay, I love visualization tools. Walk me through this spool of thread.
In this practice, you take a deep, expansive, diaphragmatic breath. As you begin to gently exhale, you produce a soft, continuous ah sound. But here is the key physical component. As you make the sound, you hold your hand near your mouth and physically mimic the motion of pulling a long, delicate, continuous thread out from between your lips.
Okay, so the visualization forces the body to regulate the airflow.
Yes, because when we are nervous, we tend to dump all of our air out on the very first word of a sentence, and then we have to squeeze the rest of the sentence out of our tightening throat.
Oh, I totally do that. I'll say, and then we went to, and then the rest of the sentence is just me gasping.
Exactly. But the imaginary thread teaches you to sustain a smooth, highly controlled, and metered exhalation. You are learning to distribute your air evenly, which is exactly the mechanic required to speak clearly and powerfully without running out of breath.
That breath control leads directly into our pacing. We mentioned earlier that PLOS, one study showing that stress makes us speak up to 22% faster. The antidote to this runaway train is what the sources refer to as the 80% rule.
The 80% rule is a total game changer for nervous speakers. When the amygdala is firing, your internal metronome is vastly accelerated. Your brain is just hitting the gas pedal.
Therefore, you must make a conscious, deliberate decision to speak at what feels to you like 80% of your normal speed.
Which feels absolutely agonizing to the speaker.
Oh, when I try this, I feel like I am speaking underwater, or like I am treating the audience like they are incredibly slow to understand me. It feels patronizing.
I know, but the internal perception is entirely distorted. If you record yourself speaking at what feels like 80% and play it back, you will realize a profound truth. To the audience, it does not sound slow at all.
It sounds authoritative.
It sounds like a leader who is in complete control of their material. Furthermore, forcing yourself to speak slower creates a biological feedback loop. It actively stimulates the vagus nerve, which engages your parasympathetic nervous system.
You are literally telling your brain, look, we're moving slowly and deliberately. Therefore, there must not be any immediate danger.
You calm your chemistry through the physical act of slowing down.
Think back to our manual car metaphor. When the engine is revving too high and screaming, you don't press the gas harder. You ease off and shift gears. Slowing down is how you shift into a powerful cruising gear.
And this pace control gives us a weapon against those dreaded filler words. Say now, AI has a brutal but incredibly effective recommendation for this. Replace every single filler word with absolute silence.
Absolute silence. That sounds so hard.
It requires immense discipline. When you are speaking and you feel that or like bubbling up in your throat as your brain searches for the next word, you must literally clamp your mouth shut for 2 full seconds.
Clamp us shut.
Yes. Filler words are the equivalent of riding the clutch. They feel safe because you are making noise and holding the floor, but you are actually burning out your credibility. Silence, however, signals massive confidence.
Hold on, though. While that makes sense on paper, we have to acknowledge how terrifying this is in practice. Doesn't a 2-second pause feel like an absolute eternity when 20 people are staring at you?
It does.
I feel like if I stopped talking for 2 whole seconds in the middle of a French exam, the examiner would think I had a stroke.
Again, you are falling victim to the distorted time perception caused by adrenaline. To you, 2 seconds of silence feels like a gaping chasm of failure. But to the audience, a 2-second pause registers as profound thoughtfulness.
Because it gives their brains a vital moment to process and digest the complex point you just made.
Exactly. When a speaker is comfortable enough to let silence hang in the air, the audience instinctively leans in. They perceive it as gravitas.
They think, I am so secure in the value of what I'm about to say that I am perfectly willing to make you wait a moment for it. That is an incredible power dynamic shift.
It changes the whole room.
Okay, so we've anchored the physical posture, we've trained the deep breath, and we've slowed the pace to 80%. Now we move into the third phase, navigating content and the unexpected. Because eventually, the mechanics have to serve actual information, and things won't always go according to plan.
Right. And the most critical, fragile moment of any speaking engagement is the very beginning. You must ruthlessly control the first 10 seconds of your interaction.
The sources highlight a fatal error most nervous speakers make here. They are so desperate to break the tension that they try to fill the silence the millisecond they step up.
Yeah, they shuffle their papers, look at the floor, and mumble, okay, sorry, let me just pull up the slide. So, yeah, today I guess I'm going to talk about.
And you instantly diminish your authority and train the audience not to respect your time.
The protocol is entirely different if you want to project confidence. You walk to your predetermined spot, you stand completely still, you plant your feet flat on the floor,
And then,
you scan the room, making deliberate, unhurried eye contact with a few specific individuals for 3 to 5 seconds each. And only then do you deliver a strong, prepared opening statement.
no apologies for being nervous. No clearing your throat into the microphone. Just stillness, connection, and power.
You command the physical space before you ever command the auditory space.
But how do we guarantee we remember that opening statement, or the rest of the content for that matter, without staring down at a script? The Podpipinic app strongly warns against the instinct to memorize a presentation word for word.
Because rote memorization is a trap built on a foundation of sand. The working memory of a stressed brain is incredibly fragile.
Right. If you memorize a 10-minute speech word for word and someone coughs loudly or a slide doesn't load and you forget a single transition word,
The entire house of cards collapses. The panic floods in because you have lost your rigid place in the script.
so what's the alternative?
Instead of memorizing, you must distill your entire presentation down to one single unshakable core message, one sentence that defines your ultimate destination.
I want this board to approve the Q3 budget. Or I want to explain to this client exactly how our software solves their pain point.
Yes, if you know the ultimate destination, you can always find your way back to the path, even if you take a conversational detour. To map out that path, the sources recommend something called a mini cheat list.
A mini cheat list, is that just a list of bullet points?
No, it is not a dense document. It is a small index card or a piece of paper with just 3 to 5 bolded keywords written in large capital letters. These keywords represent the broad chapters of your talk.
This is exactly like a jazz musician's chord chart.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
When a jazz trio is playing a complex piece, they aren't reading every single individual note off a rigid piece of sheet music. They have a chord chart that gives them the foundational structure, the progression of the song.
And because they are anchored by that safety net of structure, they are completely free to improvise the melody in the moment, reacting to each other and the audience.
Your cheat list is your chord chart. It provides the necessary structural safety without rigid confinement.
It allows you to speak conversationally, authentically, and present in the moment, rather than sounding like a robot reading a textbook.
But what happens when the audience decides to join the jazz band and play an unexpected note? Le Sherpas provides excellent guidance on handling difficult, unexpected questions, which is the exact moment when the amygdala usually tries to hijack the system again.
The very first step when you are hit with a challenging question is to pause and mentally categorize it. Is this an open question or a closed question?
What's the difference in this context?
An open question would be something like, why did you choose this specific marketing strategy over the alternatives? Which requires an elaborated structural response. A closed question is like, did the client sign the contract yesterday? Which requires a specific, factual, brief answer.
Categorizing it instantly gives your brain a framework so you don't just start rambling nervously. And if they ask a complex open question, Le Sherpas suggests relying on the STAR method to build your answer on the fly.
The STAR method is an incredibly effective cognitive scaffolding. It stands for situation, task, action, result.
So when you are thrown a complex question, you quickly frame your response in 4 steps.
Right. First, you briefly outline the situation or the context. Second, you describe the task or the specific challenge you faced. Third, you detail the precise action you took to address it. And finally, you conclude with the positive result or the lesson learned.
Let's walk through a hypothetical so the listener can really grasp this. Say a stakeholder aggressively asks, why did we lose the Johnson account last year, and why should I trust you with this new one?
Okay, so you don't panic and get defensive. You use the framework.
Situation. Last year, the Johnson account was facing severe supply chain delays.
Task. Our goal was to mitigate those delays while retaining their business.
Action. I implemented a new vendor tracking system to increase transparency, though it was deployed too late to save that specific contract.
Result. However, that system is now fully operational and has increased our current client retention by 15%, which is why this new account will be handled flawlessly.
It is brilliant because it completely prevents that nervous rambling that usually occurs when we are caught off guard. It keeps your answer tight, professional, and entirely narrative-driven.
But what if the interaction isn't just a tough question? What if the conversation turns hostile or tense? Les Sherpas heavily emphasizes practicing assertiveness in these moments.
Assertiveness is kind of the highest tier of communication under pressure, isn't it?
It really is. If tension arises, say a colleague completely dismisses your idea in a meeting, you cannot let the amygdala push you into aggressive fight mode, nor can you let it force you into submissive flight mode.
You maintain your anchored physical posture. You use positive, non-judgmental wording.
You demonstrate genuine empathy by acknowledging their concern. I hear your hesitation regarding the timeline, and then you firmly redirect the focus toward finding a collaborative solution rather than dwelling on the interpersonal conflict.
Okay, so we have the biological theory, we have the physical anchoring tools, and we have the structural content strategies. But this brings us to the final and arguably most important phase of our guide. Phase 4, practice, feedback, and follow-through.
Because you can listen to 100 hours of audio detailing how to drive a manual car, but until you actually push the clutch and grind the gears, you don't know how to drive.
None of this works if you don't train it.
Precisely. The execution is everything, and the way you practice dictates the speed of your improvement. A lot of people practice their speeches or their language vocabulary in front of a bathroom mirror.
I've done that a million times.
It's a start, but it has severe limitations because you are relying on your own subjective, adrenaline-fueled perception of how you are doing. According to communication researchers at UCLA, practicing with audio feedback, meaning actually recording your voice and listening back to it, doubles the speed of improvement compared to practicing without it.
Doubling the speed of your progress is a massive return on investment. I know it is deeply uncomfortable to listen to your own voice at first. We all cringe.
Oh, everyone hates their own voice. But a recording gives you the objective, undeniable truth. You will hear that 22% increase in speed. You will hear how often you rely on filler words.
You can't fix a mechanical error if you don't have the data to prove it exists.
And beyond just recording, the best practice involves realistic, simulated pressure. This is where modern tools like Say Now AI become invaluable. They allow you to practice specific high-pressure scenarios, like a hostile job interview or a rapid-fire networking event, and provide instant, objective data on your pacing, your clarity, and your filler word usage.
Technology provides amazing objective feedback, but human feedback is also crucial for gauging the emotional resonance of your communication, isn't it?
Absolutely. The sources bring in the Toastmasters methodology for peer evaluation, which is widely considered the global gold standard for training public speakers.
Toastmasters is effective because it is built entirely on constructive, psychologically safe feedback loops. And one of their core evaluation structures is known as the PIMP method.
PIMP, positive, improve, positive.
So if you are practicing a French dialogue with a study buddy or doing a dry run of a major presentation for a trusted colleague, they shouldn't just rip your performance to shreds. They must start with what worked the positive. Your eye contact was fantastic.
Then they give one, maybe two specific, actionable pieces of advice for improve. Try to pause for 2 seconds instead of saying between slides.
And they end on an encouraging note, the final positive. The overall structure is really compelling.
This method ensures the speaker doesn't trigger that negativity bias and become entirely demoralized. Toastmasters also utilizes the seen, heard, felt framework.
How does that one work?
The evaluator provides feedback based on 3 distinct channels. What did they visually see in your body language and posture? What did they auditorily hear in your vocal tone and pacing? And most importantly, what did they emotionally feel as a result of your delivery? Did they feel inspired, confused, or anxious?
That is such a beautifully comprehensive way to evaluate someone's presence. But I want to inject a dose of reality here for a second.
Sure.
The Toastmasters method sounds wonderful if you live in a major city with an active club, or if you have a highly emotionally intelligent study buddy willing to sit and evaluate your language practice using structured frameworks. But what about the solitary learner?
Right, the person doing this on their own.
Yeah, what about the person sitting alone in their apartment at 11 p.m. trying to master a new language before a move? Are they just out of luck because they don't have a peer group?
That is a very grounded point, and it's exactly where the intersection of discipline and technology bridges the gap. If you do not have a supportive peer group, your smartphone is your evaluator. Recording a video of yourself provides the seen and heard data.
And using AI platforms provides that untiring, objective feedback loop without ever needing a live human audience. The solitary learner is not at a disadvantage. They simply have to be more disciplined in designing their own feedback loop.
The absolute key, as Stefani points out in her language learning framework, is building the habit through microexposures. She strongly recommends setting a hyper-realistic schedule and relentlessly following through.
If your goal is just to learn 3 new vocabulary words a day, or to record one 60-second video of yourself practicing your presentation intro every morning, you have to execute it.
The act of keeping that tiny promise to yourself builds an internal foundation of self-respect. And internal self-respect translates directly into outward, quiet assurance.
Micro exposures to the stressor, putting yourself in a slightly uncomfortable speaking situation over and over again, combined with consistent objective feedback, literally rewires the neural pathways of the brain over a period of weeks.
You are proving to the amygdala, rep by rep, that the saber-toothed tiger does not exist.
Which brings us to a vital, often completely ignored piece of advice as we wrap up this deep dive. Stefani emphasizes one final requirement for true mastery: the joy of learning.
It sounds cliché, doesn't it? But it is deeply neurological. If you treat your speaking practice, your presentation prep, or your language learning as a miserable, punishing chore, your brain will actively resist it.
Because cortisol blocks memory consolidation.
Exactly. Stefani urges learners to connect their practice to things they actually love. If you love sports, spend your time learning sports vocabulary. If you love cinema, watch films in your target language and try to mimic the actors.
When you are happy and relaxed, dopamine is released. And dopamine is essentially a neurological lubricant for learning.
Retention skyrockets, neural pathways form faster, and the words flow more easily because the amygdala is calm. Joy isn't just a nice bonus, it is a biological requirement for efficient learning.
I love that. Joy is a biological requirement. Let's summarize the mechanical journey we've mapped out today for you. We started by completely reframing the problem. We diagnosed the biology of fear, understanding that a racing heart, shallow breath, and a barrage of filler words are just the amygdala running an outdated survival program.
And we learn to redefine true confidence, moving away from loud, defensive arrogance and embracing quiet assurance marked by self-control, clarity, and presence.
We then laid out the physical and mental foundation, actively documenting micro-victories with the success roll to fight the negativity bias, anchoring the body with expansive posture to signal safety to the brain, and keeping our feet grounded to stop the physical anxiety loop.
We trained the vocal instrument by mastering deep diaphragmatic breathing, pulling the imaginary spool of thread to control airflow, and employing the 80% rule to force our parasympathetic nervous system into a state of calm.
We tackled the actual content by commanding the first 10 seconds with silence and eye contact, throwing away the fragile, memorized scripts in favor of the flexible jazz chord cheat lists, and using the STAR method to construct unbreakable narrative answers to difficult questions.
And finally, we emphasized the absolute non-negotiable necessity of objective feedback, whether through audio recordings, AI tools, or the constructive Toastmasters frameworks to ensure we are actually fixing the mechanics.
It is a highly practical, mechanical approach to a problem that most people mistakenly treat as a permanent personality flaw.
And looking at confidence through this mechanical lens leads me to a final thought I'd like to leave everyone with today.
Let's hear it.
If confidence is not something you were born with, but rather a muscle built through micro-exposures, deliberate posture, breath control, and targeted feedback, how might treating your everyday, mundane conversations as active practice reps fundamentally alter not just your public speaking abilities, but your entire personal identity and your relationships within a single year?
That is a profound perspective shift. Every brief conversation you have with a barista, every quick 2-minute update you give in a morning huddle, every time you try to piece together a sentence with a language partner, they aren't just throwaway moments.
They are reps.
They are low-stakes opportunities to practice planting your feet, pulling a deep breath into your belly, slowing your pace to 80%, and finding comfort in a 2-second pause.
Every single interaction is an opportunity to practice the mechanics of true assurance.
So the next time you feel that familiar wave of panic rising in your chest, whether you are trying to order a coffee in a crowded Parisian cafe or pitching a make-or-break idea to a room full of skeptical investors, remember, you are not fatally flawed.
Your hard drive isn't broken.
You are just learning to drive a manual car. You might grind the gears a little bit, you might stall the engine once or twice. But if you relentlessly practice the mechanics, the breath, the posture, the pacing, the pause, soon enough, neuroplasticity will do its job. Muscle memory will take over.
And before you know it, you won't be staring down at the pedals in a state of panic anymore.
You'll just be looking out the windshield, enjoying the ride.